Part 60. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 591. When Newgate finished, they both laughed, as if the conversation had been funny. After laughing, Newgate asked, "Are you not in a hurry?" Orgrim waved his hand and said very calmly, "Why should I be in a hurry? You, on the other hand, are not in a hurry." "I am already old, so I am not in a hurry." Newgate smiled and shook his head. After a slight pause, Newgate waved his hand again, pointed to the blanket beside him, and asked, "A drink?" Orgrim looked over there, then grinned and said, "Okay, I'll have a drink with you." After saying that, both of them smiled again and sat on the blanket. Newgate chose this place as the battle venue for the two to decide who was the strongest. Then he was naturally the host. After he sat down, he raised his hand to grab the wine bottle, picked up the wine bowl, and poured wine for himself and Orgrim. Orgrim didn't show any politeness to this guy. He sat cross-legged and picked up the wine. "I ate the cakes on the plate, minding my own business." "Not bad. Where did you buy it?" Orgrim asked as he chewed the cake in his mouth. "Koo-la-la-la-la, Sachi, my son, he is a great cook, he made it with his own hands," Newgate said with a smile. "Is he still a chef?" "I don't know," Orgrim said while eating. "If you, a bastard, know everything, how can I still be a pirate?" Newgate said with a smile after pouring the wine. After finishing speaking, he handed a wine bowl to Orgrim. Orgrim did not pretend to be reserved and took it directly. He did not open it immediately. After drinking, Newgate picked up a bunch of hot barbecue and started eating with Orgrim. While eating, Newgate asked, "This is the first time for the two of us to sit and chat like this?" "In my mind, it should be the first time." Orgrim nodded and said, "Life." Newgate shook his head with emotion. After a short pause, he asked again, "I heard that you don't like drinking." "It's not that I don't like it, it's just that I rarely drink it. I prefer tea to wine." Orgrim touched his chin and thought for a moment. "Koo-la-la-la-la, at this point, you really don't look like a pirate. How can you not drink as a pirate? If you don't drink, why would you be a pirate?" Newgate laughed. As soon as he finished speaking, he grabbed the wine bowl and raised it towards Orgrim. Orgrim was not polite, he also grabbed the wine bowl and touched it with Newgate. The two then everyone put the wine bowl to their mouths and drank it all in one gulp. "Hiss, good wine." After Orgrim finished drinking, he praised, "This is a fine wine that I have collected for many years." "Most people can't drink it," Newgate said with some pride. "Gee, ha 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 ha, then let's put it that way, I'm not ordinary," Orgrim laughed. Newgate looked into Orgrim's eyes, then laughed and said, "You are indeed extraordinary and qualified to drink with me." "Of course," Orgrim also said unceremoniously. But after finishing speaking, Orgrim smiled again and said, "You should drink less wine." "Mother-in-law, wine is a good thing," Newgate said dissatisfiedly. "I'm afraid your body won't be able to handle it later if you drink too much." Orgrim joked. "Koo-la-la-la-la, you are so arrogant. After I drink these 2 bottles of wine, I will beat you with only one hand," Newgate boasted. "Gee, ha 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 ha, then I am really looking forward to it." Orgrim laughed again. But after Newgate laughed a few times, he said with some emotion, "But to be honest, sometimes, I also envy you." "What do you envy me for?" Orgrim asked casually while eating barbecue. "I envy your bastard's physical fitness." During this period, Marco and the others would often ask me to drink less. "If I had your physical fitness, I'm afraid it wouldn't be a problem to soak in a wine vat all day long, right?" Newgate said with a smile. "Both you and Boss Shiji are really addicted to alcohol," Orgrim also said with some emotion. After a short pause, Orgrim asked again, "What? Is your health not good?" Newgate did not pretend to be anything, and nodded very calmly, "It's a little worse than before. I've been feeling weak recently. Feeling some back pain. As he spoke, he reached out and hammered his waist. Orgrim said with a smile, then use your waist less and go to bed early at night. It is better than anything else. You are dozens of years old, there is no need to be so romantic, right? Newgate was stunned for a moment, then laughed. Then he said, "Cool la 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 la, it's all because I'm so charming." Orgrim didn't say anything sympathetic, nor did he express any pity. This pleased Newgate. He was just an old friend and had no intention of hiding Orgrim's condition. If Orgrim really said something about sympathy and mercy, Newgate would think that this bastard Orgrim was hypocritical. That's fine. No one should sympathize with him, especially his opponents. Just think of it as a love affair. And you? How are you lately? Newgate asked again after laughing. I just give it a try, life is actually quite boring. In this new world, apart from you, no one seems to be able to bring me surprises and expectations. Ah, by the way, have you heard about Totland? The sand crocodile that you drove out of the new world back then is back. This is a bit beyond my expectation. I'm really looking forward to it. I don't know how far that guy can go, but don't let me down. It would be nice to bring some fun to this boring world, otherwise I won't be able to spare him, Orgrim said nonchalantly. Newgate didn't feel annoyed either. He held the wine glass and sipped it with a smile. He listened very seriously and nodded from time to time. Crocodile boy, I was just as interesting as you back then, but in the end I was still much worse than you. His new world this time is probably not a joke. Maybe he won't disappoint you and can bring you some fun, Newgate said with a smile. Sand crocodile suddenly emerged in the new world. And he showed off perfectly. He was so cunning, cooperated with the navy, Katakuri, and even Charlotte Lingling, the red-haired Shanks, who he had worked with before, was almost taken away by him, and he even directly knocked him back to his original form. He had a kind of boss style that let him be strong and let the breeze blow over the mountains. It can be said that the limelight is the same. But at this time, in the words of Orgrim and Newgate, the two real top bosses in the new world. Crocodile seems to be just a little fun, and even Orgrim and Newgate did not worry about the changes that Crocodile would bring. On the contrary, both of them seemed to be looking forward to Crocodile's wonderful performance. Yes, invincibility is lonely, and so is the new world. Lonely. It would be great if someone could bring change and fun. Maybe, this seems a little silly. But in fact, this is not the two people's absolute confidence in themselves and their power. No matter what the future holds, they have never been afraid. No matter what challenges there are, they have never avoided them. It is precisely because of their absolute confidence in themselves that the two of them can sit in the strongest position. Go on, talk and laugh. People who are afraid of challenges and shrink from the future. They are not worthy and will never be the strongest. Gee ha 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 ha, I hope so. Orgrim said with a smile. Afterwards, he had another drink with Newgate, and the two chatted a lot about everything. Some talked about Roger, and some talked about Chiji. After listening to Orgrim's story, and also listened to Newgate's story, the two of them connected the past and the future, and they can be regarded as experiencing several eras on the sea. If you write a story based on the two of them, I am afraid that millions of words will not be able to stop it. Right? The living legend is Newgate and Orgrim. So, what were you thinking at that time? Why did you join Rox? At that time, who was stronger between you and Rox? Orgrim asked curiously. Join the company? Newgate raised his eyebrows, then waved his hands and said, "Don't use such words, I am not a member of the Banner." Oh? How to say? Orgrim asked, touching his chin. Shiki didn't tell you. Newgate took a sip of wine and asked. Boss Shiji? Orgrim thought for a while, then shook his head and said, I didn't say much, but I didn't ask. In fact, I rarely talk about these things with Boss Shiji. You know that guy, except Roger. Besides, he never looked back and kept talking about the present and the future, which was boring. It seems that once, I heard him mention something about an opportunity to make a lot of money, and then you guys got together. When Newgate heard Orgrim complaining about Shiki here, he laughed and responded, yes, that bastard Shiki is actually very boring. He clings to his own ambitions all day long and drags him to the sky. Went. Gee, ha 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 ha, I feel better now, and my attention seems to be on my son. Orgrim laughed and echoed. After laughing for a while, Newgate nodded and said, yes, an opportunity to make a lot of money. But that's not the reason I'm looking for. Orgrim took a sip of wine and listened quietly. Although Rox is the captain, in fact, we, the so-called former members of Rox Pirates, are not very convinced by him, and the relationship between us is not that close. We all often fight, especially it's that bastard Shiki. He's messed with everyone on the ship, so, in real terms, we are not Rox. Essentially, this is just a pirate alliance. Newgate recalled the past and said with some emotion. As for who is stronger or weaker between Rox and me, I have never done anything, and at that time, I was still young. Although I was strong, I had not reached my peak state. Shiji had done something with Rox, but there was no real winner, so it was settled. But it is undeniable that Rox is very strong, Newgate said softly. After thinking for a moment, he laughed again and said, but if it were me in my strongest period, I would definitely be stronger than him, right? Gee, ha 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 ha, you are really not humble at all. Orgrim laughed and joked. Why should I be humble? Koolalala la. Newgate also laughed and said. After laughing, Newgate added, as for the opportunity to make a lot of money, I don't care much. That's true. Who doesn't know that you, Newgate, regard money as dirt? Even though you have been the strongest pirate for so many years and have been a pirate for so long, you are still in poverty, Orgrim said with a smile. It's really enviable that you, the Warhammer Pirates clan, can't compare to your great achievements, making money every day, Newgate also said with a smile. If you do less charity, there is no need to envy me. Orgrim teased. Newgate was stunned for a moment, and then said, you know so much. Orgrim did not answer, but asked, so, since it was not to make a lot of money, why did you join Rox in the first place? Newgate did not ask how Orgrim learned that he was doing this. Regarding the matter of charity, I thought about it for a while with a somewhat reminiscing look on my face. After a long time, Newgate said, perhaps, in order to find the sense of identification between monsters, that kind of feeling. Family. When I was young, I was called a monster on the sea. I heard that there were many people like me on Locke's ship, so I went there, that's all, but the result was, naturally, is disappointing to me. Although there are many monsters, after all, they are not people in the same boat. Since then, I have understood that what I am looking for is not a monster as powerful as me, but just like-minded people who can recognize each other. In this lonely place a sea of interdependent people is enough, which I usually call family. Orgrim continued softly. Newgate grinned and said, that's right, family. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 592. My family is the most precious treasure I have found on the sea in my life, the kind that I would not exchange for anything, Newgate said with a smile. It is indeed very valuable. Orgrim didn't mock anything and nodded in approval. My sons all admire me as their father, so I will not show any mercy in this battle, and I will definitely win, Newgate said without hesitation. Gee, ha 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 ha, I don't agree with this. The one who wins in the end must be me. Orgrim laughed and said. Newgate did not argue about anything, but also laughed. After laughing, he asked, so, why do you want to compete for the strongest? Reason? Orgrim touched his chin and murmured. After thinking for a while, Orgrim said there is no special reason. Do you need a reason to talk about this? Don't need it? Newgate asked rhetorically. Gee ha 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 ha, are you discussing philosophy with me here? As pirates, can we be more dedicated? Don't do all these bells and whistles, Orgrim laughed. Newgate also laughed. He now discovered that Orgrim was really interesting. In the past, I should have had more drinks with him. Perhaps regardless of their positions, he and Orgrim should get along very well, right? They appreciate each other and recognize each other. Whether as an opponent or as a best friend, he is the best choice. Well, you asked, so I have to think of a reason to come. For Avalon? Maybe, but that's not all the case. I'm quite selfish when it comes to things like this. What I really want to say is ambition. This description is not appropriate. Yes, that's the feeling. I've been walking around in this damn world, but I have to go to the highest place to see the scenery. To be a pirate, you have to be the strongest. Otherwise, wouldn't this trip to this damn world be in vain? Orgrim said boldly. If you come to this damn world, why don't you go to the highest point and see the scenery? Newgate's eyes lit up and he repeated. Gee ha 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 ha, yes, a good reason, right? Orgrim laughed. Cool la 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 la, that's a really good reason. Come on, why don't you have a drink for this good reason you just made up? Newgate raised the wine bowl and said. Orgrim was not polite at all. He picked up the wine bowl, signaled to Newgate and drank it all. At the same time, on the Black Narwhal, Queen Stacy is holding a telescope and observing the situation on the island. Next to her, there is a phone bug. Over there are multiple connections. Many cotters of the Warhammer pirates are there. Are you paying attention to the situation here? How about it? How about it? Stussy. Did Master Hammer get into a fight with that guy from Newgate? Do you need us to come and help? I'm very fast. The marksmanship is particularly good, the Sphinx shouted on the phone. Even Beckman couldn't help but ask how is the situation? Why didn't you hear any movement? The rest of the cotters, you and I asked one sentence after another. Stussy's expression was a little strange. He lowered the telescope a little and said to the people on the other side of the phone, you may not believe it, Og. Reem was drinking with Newgate. Although he couldn't hear what they were talking about, at least it seemed that the atmosphere was very good. The two of them would toast and laugh from time to time. The officers of the Warhammer pirates are all confused. Drink wine? Didn't we agree to have an earth-shattering and strongest showdown? We have bought melon seeds, and you two are sitting together drinking? Should I pay back the fight? Everyone is very busy. We have to go to bed early at night and get up early to go to work tomorrow, okay. Beckman, on the other hand, couldn't help laughing and said they are really interested. These two guys, is this the calmness of top strong men? Anyway, I can't understand it. Neiman said on the phone, maybe, this also means that my brother must decide the outcome with Newgate this time, right? As soon as Neiman finished speaking, all the cotters in the phone bug fell silent. They were fighting to the death. Perhaps this wine was the last one for the two of them. Then before the duel, they drank wine, talked and laughed, it seemed reasonable. At this moment, Plank's voice came from the phone bug. Your Majesty, please pay more attention. According to the latest information I have received, G-5's Navy seems to be near Roaring Island as well, Plank said in a deep voice. Stussy frowned and said, any witness information? No, but according to reliable information, the only ones who actually escorted Charlotte Lingling back to the first half of the Grand Line were Kuzan and Porisalino. Jun and Fujitoro were not around, so I don't know what they went to place, but I don't rule out the possibility that they will repeat their old tricks. Pay more attention to the sky. Fujitora's ability can be used to fly. Planck quickly explained. Queen Stacy looked up at the sky and found no trace of the G-5 Navy, but she still responded softly, I understand, I will take more precautions. Repeating old tricks? That shameless woman from Jun still dares to have such an idea? Stussy, I'm going to back up now, cried the Sphinx. But before she could finish her words, Beckman covered her mouth and pulled away from the phone. Then, Beckman said with a smile, don't be so nervous. The battle between Orgrim and Newgate is different from the battle on Cake Island. Give the Navy some courage, and they may not dare to intervene. At some point, Doflamingo also came online and turned this phone bug's multi-person connection into a chat room. Doflamingo smiled and said, yes, I don't think the Navy dares to act recklessly. Even if they appear here, they are probably to get first-hand information. Everyone should know that Orgrim and Newgate, how much attention is paid to this battle. Once anyone dares to interfere in this and make some messy things, then wait for the two of them to join forces to take crazy revenge. I think, in this world, no one can withstand the anger of these two sea kings, not only pirates, but also the Navy, no way. Lord Orgrim will definitely win, Hancock shouted at the phone bug. As soon as she finished speaking, everyone laughed. Even Queen Stussy had a smile on her lips. Ha 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 ha, yes, Orgrim will definitely win, we will never doubt this, Beckman said with a smile. At this moment, Her Majesty the Queen seemed to feel something. It was unclear, it was just intuition. Without any suspicion, Her Majesty the Queen directly picked up the telescope and looked towards the island. Next, for a second, she said softly to the many cotters on the other side of the phone, the drinking party between Orgrim and Newgate seems to be over. Over at the phone bug, everyone's breathing seemed to become faster. After a long time, Beckman said softly, the strongest battle, about to turn it on. Did you catch the live phone bug? Open it quickly, the Sphinx shouted eagerly. Queen Stacy waved her hand, and several pirates behind her quickly walked down. Not long after, a live phone bug was caught on the highest observation deck on the Black Narwhal. Awakened, his eyes glowed, taking in everything on Roaring Island. On the other side, inside the island, Orgrim held a wine bottle in his hand, shook it on the wine bowl with unfinished thoughts, and finally said with a smile, no more. Well, it's the last bowl. Newgate also threw away the empty wine bottle in his hand, took the wine bowl and said, then let's have the last bowl. I'm almost done. Yes, I'm almost enjoying myself, Orgrim smiled. The two of them looked at each other, and then without clinking glasses, with smiles on their lips, they drank the last bowl of wine in front of this ferocious battle axe. After drinking, Orgrim gently placed the wine bowl on the blanket. Without speaking, he stood up very naturally, turned around and walked towards where Hank and Marco were. Newgate smiled but said nothing. He also stood up, completely ignoring the food scattered on the blanket, and turned around and took a few steps towards the battle axe. There, a big knife was stuck upside down on the ground. It's Kong Yunki. Taking the warhammer from Hank's hand, Orgrim smiled and said, go back to the ship and wait. Hank nodded, and then said in a deep voice, Hammer, when Her Majesty the Queen was on the ship, she asked me to bring you a message at this last moment. Orgrim was stunned for a moment, and then said, what are you talking about? If you lose, she will cook meals for you for a year to comfort you, Hank said with a smirk on his lips. Orgrim's eyes almost filled with touched tears. He reached out and patted Hank's shoulder and said, go back and tell Stussy that I will definitely win. Even if I die here, I will never admit defeat. Marco also walked to Newgate's side at this time. With a smile on his face, he said calmly, Dad, if nothing happens, I will go back to the ship first. Well, go back. Newgate waved his hands very calmly. Marco didn't say anything more. A green flame burned on his body, and he was about to turn into a phoenix and fly away. But as soon as he flapped his wings twice, Newgate he spoke again, "Get ready for a banquet to celebrate victory. You can't stop me from drinking this time." Marco laughed when he heard this and said, "No problem, Dad, I will ensure that there are enough drinks this time." Soon, Marco and Hank left the island. The Moby Dick and the Black Narwhal also sailed away from the port to avoid being affected by the competition between these two top masters. At this point, only Orgrim and Newgate were left on the entire roaring island. Putting the warhammer on his shoulder, Orgrim walked towards Newgate again. Newgate also held Kongyunki in his hand and walked towards Orgrim. Soon, the two stood opposite each other. No one spoke, but in the silence, the aura of the two people gradually increased. Strong fighting spirit continued to overflow from the eyes of the two men. The rising momentum began to solidify, and the invisible energy was released wantonly. The sand and gravel on the ground also started to roll. But soon, everything became peaceful again. Silence, silence. The birds and insects on the island seemed to feel the unusual pressure, and they all lost their voices. The sea breeze that was still flowing seemed to have stopped. The blue sea outside the island was silent, with an aura of terror. It seems that it can choose people to devour at any time. On the boat, Queen Stacy held the telescope nervously, not daring to blink, and stared at the situation on the island. At this moment, Orgrim smiled, with an unruly smile on his lips. Newgate also smiled, with a confident smile on his lips. Just when the two of them were smiling the most, Newgate tightened his grip on Kongyunki, and Orgrim suddenly exerted force on his feet. Moved. For a moment, the birds and insects on the island seemed to be alive again. The originally still wind also became noisy. The sea has become turbulent. Come, Newgate did not move on the spot. He drew a semicircle in front of him from the bottom up with the cloud cutter in his hand. The blade was pointed directly at Orgrim's figure. Orgrim also shouted, "Fight!" The warhammer in his hand was swung from top to bottom. A howling wind arose. The next moment, the warhammer and the broadsword collided violently. The wind was howling, and the whole island seemed to be roaring. Wind, wind, wind. Please give me flowers and monthly tickets, bosses. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 593. New World Wano Country. Kaido was sitting under a cherry blossom tree. He was holding his big wine flask in his hand and was drinking by himself. Watching a cherry blossom falling from the sky. Kaido's eyes were a little wandering, and his thoughts were also wandering. Calculate the time, should we start? The decisive battle between Orgrim and Whitebeard, Kaido whispered softly. Kaido actually wants to participate in this kind of battle. Obviously he is also the strongest. How? Do you look down on the strongest creature? Aren't there rumors in the sea? As for a one-on-one challenge, I am stronger. Why didn't Brother Orgrim and that guy with Whitebeard take me to play? But soon, Kaido smiled again, shook his head and said, yes, it must be because it was the good brother who put the duel with me at the end. This just shows that in his heart, I am more important, yes. After saying that, Kaido repeated it again, yes, I must be more important. Then, Kaido laughed, picked up the wine bottle, and drank another drink for himself. After happily burping, Kaido reached out and touched the wound on his neck that no longer existed. That's right, for Kaido, that kind of fatal injury is not a big deal as long as he is given some time to breathe. Most people rarely say that they have to lie down for 3 to 5 months to recuperate. But Kaido has recovered now. Maybe Brother Sien is worried about my injury, so that's why he's like this? Wrong. Did Brother Sien expect that I would be injured? Could it be that he did it on purpose? So you can use this to get rid of me? No, no, how could I think like this? My dear brother, you probably gave me the important battlefield of Totland to cause trouble out of trust. My hawk and the others should be the ones who arranged to deal with me as a complete strategy. Ha 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 ha, that's right. Thinking about it this way, Brother Xian really values me. Are you afraid that something bad will happen to me? Kaido muttered to himself again. Not far away, he saw his boss drinking alone, talking and laughing. Quinn was silent for a while, and said to Jack beside him, "Is this the case? The legendary self-strategy?" Jack, the silly boy, nodded blankly and said, "It seems like." But at this moment when his voice fell, there was a slight vibration on the ground. For a time, the scattered cherry blossoms became more busy. "Here we go," Kaido's eyes flashed and he whispered to himself. At the same time, at Naval Headquarters Marineford, Warring States, the Navy Grand Admiral, was also standing in front of the window of his office, looking out at the huge Justice Square in Marineford. "The duel to decide the outcome of the New World War," Marshal Warring States whispered softly. His eyes seemed to want to cross the sea, cross the Red Earth continent, see through this new world, see through Orgrim and Newgate. At this moment, the door of his office opened directly was pushed away. Marshal Warring States did not look back. He knew that in the whole of Marineford, the only one who could do such a thing was Garp. That's right, he dared to force open the Marshal's office without knocking on the door. It was Garp who opened the door. He walked in without saying a word, walked slowly to Sengoku's side, and also looked out the window. He didn't know what Garp was looking at. After a long time, Garp then spoke. "Warring States, the intelligence department has just received the latest information, saying that all local wars, large and small, have been stopped in the New World, whether it is the active silver medal players or the white people at the center of the war. The Beard Pirates and Warhammer Pirates both stopped their movements." Warring States did not turn around, but said softly, "They are all waiting, just like us, waiting for a result, waiting for a..." "Wait a minute, climb to the top of the New World's strongest, the Royal Overlord is born." Garp continued his words and whispered. "That's right." Marshal Warring States nodded. At this moment, there was a slight shock in Marineford. The eyes of Marshal Warring States and Lieutenant General Garp shrank slightly at this moment. "Here we go," Sengoku and Garp said at the same time. "Earthquake. That guy from Newgate, who claims to be able to destroy the world, is really not a joke. Even if others are fighting Orgrim in the New World, it is possible that the power is enough to radiate to Marineford. Or even further. In fact, maybe the whole world can feel his power." Suddenly, Garp laughed. "Ha ha 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 ha." Warring States looked at Garp strangely and asked, "What are you laughing at?" "This reminds me of many years ago," Garp said. Before Sengoku could ask anything, Garp continued, "During the Battle of Butter Island, do you remember? Your office was blown open, and the power of Orgrim and Newgate suddenly appeared here." After listening to Garp's words, Warring States couldn't help but smile, nodded and said, "That's what happened." "Do you think I will be so unlucky today?" Garp asked with a smile. "Impossible, how could such a coincidence happen?" The Warring States Marshal waved his hand and said without hesitation. Garp nodded with a smile, and then said, "Yeah, how could it be possible to be so unlucky? Speaking of which, our navy has turned around. East China Sea, Windmill Village. A little guy who is still a little immature in appearance, but can already be seen as handsome, is standing on the top of the mountain, looking at the sea. Today's earthquakes are really frequent." The little guy reached out and pressed the hat on his head and said with a smile, "Ace, Portkas de Ace. The bloodline of the pirate king Roger, the great mother Portkas de Luju risked her life to protect her child. More than 10 years ago, that one stayed in my mother's belly for a full 20 months. The little baby who inherited Roger's bloodline is now a grown man." Ace held a newspaper in his hand. "A few days ago, the News of the World newspaper published an article that stated that the two sea kings, Whitebeard Edward Newgate and King of the Night, Khazgarot Orgrim, would meet on Roaring Island in the New World. News of the war. And today is the day for their appointment. Ace was actually paying close attention to this day and this battle. Garp has never hidden anything from him. At a very young age, Ace already knew that he was Roger's son, and the blood of Roger, the Pirate King, was flowing in his body. But Ace was not proud of it. On the contrary, he hated his identity very much. Because Roger brought him almost all painful memories. Whenever anyone mentioned Roger, they didn't say anything good. And he, Ace, grew up in this kind of environment where everyone dislikes him. He had even doubted something before. That is it really good for me to be born and live in this world? Does he really have the qualifications to survive? He brought this inquiry and doubt to Garp. And Garp told him the answer was I don't know. Then, he said, wouldn't it be possible to know this kind of thing if you live and see it? Yes, if you live to see this kind of thing, you will know it. After that, Ace stopped asking such questions. He suppressed this doubt in his heart. He wants to live and see, and he also wants to go to this vast sea to find an answer. Roger, his father, the king of pirates. He wanted to find the people related to Roger and hear for himself how these people felt about Roger. Whitebeard Edward Newgate, once known as the Big Three of New World pirates along with Shisky and Roger. He had fought against Roger, his own father, more than once. It is a living legend that has passed through that era. The Lord of the Night, Khazgarot Orgrim, is also a guy deeply involved with his father. Even the day of his father's execution was turned upside down by him. For the death of the king, offer blood and salute. It was he who gave his father a decent death. Be it Whitebeard or the King of the Night. Both of them are rivals and good friends with their father, Roger, right? Today, these two people will have a decisive battle in the New World, and these two people will also have to decide who is better. The strongest in the world, Ace whispered softly. Then, he smiled, the smile on his face was one of expectation and brightness. He looked at the sea and whispered there are answers for everyone in the sea. Stay alive and see. You'll know the answer, Whitebeard, Lord of the Night, when I go to sea, I will visit you. After a slight pause, Ace clenched his fists and said confidently, of course, as a challenger. If you stood at your level, you might be able to understand a little bit more. Roger, what did that guy think? At this moment, another little guy ran out of the dense forest behind Ace. Ace. You are indeed here. There are so many earthquakes today, the little guy smiled and said hello. Oh, Luffy, it is indeed very frequent. This is the world cheering and looking forward to it, right? Ace turned around and said with a smile. Once, they were three brothers. But now, they are two brothers. Sabo has already gone to the sea one step ahead of them. But the sea is always so rough, cruel and ruthless. What to expect? Luffy asked a little strangely. As a simple idiot, Luffy didn't understand the weird and complicated situation on the sea at all. At most, it was what Shanks forced him to talk about back then. Some common sense or something. On the sea, the king of the next era is about to be born. I am afraid that I am looking forward to this. Ace thought for a while and said with a very serious expression. King, Luffy was stunned for a moment. Ace couldn't help laughing, nodded, and said that's right, King. One Piece? What's that one called? Khazgarot Orgrim, Luffy asked in surprise. Ace was also stunned. Do you still know Khazgarot Orgrim? But soon, he shook his head and said no, it's not the Pirate King, but another concept. King of, but I'm really surprised, Luffy, you actually know about the existence of this guy Orgrim. Are you looking down on me? Ace, Luffy said a little bit. Then, Luffy said with a proud face. I still know the king of the night, and I will defeat him in the future. Did Shanks tell you? Ace asked with a smile. Luffy nodded and said, yeah, Shanks told me that back then. It's very difficult to defeat him, so work hard. Luffy. Ace smiled and walked past Luffy, stretched out his hand and pressed it. The straw hat that Luffy wore on his head was very precious to him. Luffy first adjusted his hat, and then shouted. He yelled and followed behind Ace. Hey, Ace, you haven't told me yet, who is the king of the next era? What did you say? Ha 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 ha, go to the sea to find the answer to this kind of thing yourself. The sea is the destination of all doubts, there is the answer that everyone is looking for, Ace said with a laugh. Soon, these two little guys left here. The waves of the times are rolling in. There are everyone's answers in the sea. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 594. Howling sea wind passes through roaring island. The rocks on the island roared like a roar due to the sea breeze. The sea around here is also roaring and roaring. The turbulent waves spread out into the distance one after another, and gradually gathered into tsunamis at the edge of the sea level. Two huge pirate battleships were rising and falling on the turbulent sea, observing the battle on the island. A transparent halo of energy appeared on the blade, and Newgate's arm muscles exploded, and he slashed forward with the knife. Wherever the blade passed, the space vibrated and shattered. It seems that he may break everything at any time. A powerful impact burst out from the scorching war hammer. Without any fear of this extremely powerful vibration, it hit the blade. The power of impact and vibration entangled with each other, completely shattering the space, revealing dark cracks. A smile appeared on the corner of Newgate's lips. At the same time, Orgrim, who was fighting against him, also started laughing. Gee ha 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 ha, what about the back pain you promised? I didn't feel it at all. Even though I started to move my hands, it was still so violent. Orgrim laughed loudly. Newgate exerted force in his hand again, forcing the blade down, and then laughed loudly. Kulalalalala, where are you now? When I'm romantic, I work harder than this. Then damn you, you are really getting stronger with age. Orgrim laughed loudly, and then, his eyes flashed, and the impact force in his hand exploded out. Boom. The explosion was a violent explosion. Explosions without smoke. An explosion of energy. The force of impact and tremor finally detonated the space where the two men were fighting. The powerful aftermath of the explosion was directly vented. Both Newgate and Orgrim were pushed out by the aftermath. The two of them took a few steps back in unison. Orgrim tightened the war hammer in his hand, and the strong impact force seemed to turn into substance and began to entangle the head of the war hammer. Newgate's eyes became a little more serious, and the powerful trembling force continued to condense on the tip of Kongyunki's knife. The next moment, two powerful auras burst out from the two of them. Overlord color. The domineering confrontations of the two kings of the sea collided with each other. There was no actual confrontation, but this space still could not withstand the domineering confrontations of the two sea kings. It shattered directly, and the dark, nameless lightning continued to twist in the void. The world changes color. In the already stormy sky, the clouds began to be continuously pushed down. The tsunami on the sea is higher than the wave. Just when the impact force on the war hammer in Orgrim's hand condensed to the extreme, he moved. The sigh of the Dragon King, Orgrim raised his hand and threw out the war hammer, pointing the hammerhead directly at Newgate's figure. As the words fell, the impact force turned into a beam of light, hitting Newgate's figure at an extremely fast speed. Extremely shocking, the Kongyunki in Newgate's hand also drew a semicircle in the air, with extremely strong trembling power, and slashed out against the shock wave. The elephant was invisible, and the loud sound was loud. It seemed like something. It was as if nothing had happened. It seemed as if no sound had ever been heard. Everything returned to silence. But at this moment, Orgrim's eyes lit up with a red light, and then the muscles in his chest followed. He started to tremble, and his strong chest suddenly collapsed, then returned to its original state again. At the same time, his feet lifted off the ground, and an extremely strong force rushed into him without knowing when. Within his body, Orgrim was directly thrown out. Newgate's side also didn't feel well. The tall figure also rose from the ground with its feet and flew out upside down. What happened? Queen Stacy held a telescope and looked at the sudden situation of the two top masters, murmuring with some confusion. But the next moment, the invisible and immaterial surging power spread here. The sea surface was directly covered by. After being lowered by several meters, the black narwhal's highly defensive hull made a cracking sound, and several huge cracks appeared on the deck. At the same moment, Queen Stacy's hand, the telescope lens, was directly shattered. Then, the Queen's figure was hit by a strong pressure and couldn't help but take a few steps back. On the other side, Moby Dick was also under tremendous pressure. Marco withstood the powerful invisible force, and the blue flames on his body burned involuntarily. "Dad," Marco murmured with a hint of worry in his eyes. After rolling several times in the air, Orgrim suddenly landed on his feet, and the ground instantly exploded due to the pressure. "Gee, ha 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 ha, so happy," Orgrim laughed loudly. As soon as he finished speaking, he exerted force on his feet again. The ground that had originally collapsed turned into powder. The hot war hammer drew a red trajectory in the air. Orgrim didn't hold back at all. He faced Newgate's head and smashed it out with one hammer. "Explode, reality," Orgrim shouted loudly. Newgate also stood firm on the ground at this time, looked at the ferocious Orgrim, and laughed, "Kula la la la, it is really fun." After saying that, the Konjai-unki in his hand brought with it an extremely powerful trembling force, and slashed at Orgrim. The tremor and impact force were entangled again. But this time, Orgrim did not fight with what was Gate wrestling with. The moment the stalemate force came from the handle of the hammer in his hand, his eyes flashed, and the war hammer was released directly, and was smashed away by Newgate's powerful force. At the same time, Orgrim's figure at an extremely fast speed, he moved towards Newgate. A powerful shockwave condensed on his fist. The roar of the Dragon King, a fierce light flashed in Orgrim's eyes, and he roared and punched Newgate in the chest. Newgate's reaction speed was not slow either. The moment Orgrim took off his hammer, he had already realized something. However, he did not throw away the Konjai-unki in his hand like Orgrim. On the contrary, after knocking away the ferocious war hammer, he kept moving in his hand, slid inward, and slashed towards the chest with the blade. In front. Sure enough, in the next moment, Orgrim's figure had already filled the empty space and punched himself in the chest. With a flash in his eyes, Newgate shouted, "Open!" At the same moment, Orgrim's fist hit Newgate's chest hard. But his expression suddenly changed. "Are you so decisive?" As soon as he finished speaking, Newgate's trembling Kongyunkai slashed directly on Orgrim's chest. The arm domineering energy attached to it at an extremely fast speed, and was shattered at an extremely fast speed. And then, Orgrim's sturdy figure was blown away. Cough, a mouthful of blood spurted out from Orgrim's mouth. His figure rolled several times in the air and then landed on the ground. He suddenly took a few steps back to release the trembling power from his body. Orgrim raised his hand to wipe the corner of his mouth, then lowered his head and looked at his chest where he had been slashed. There was no obvious trauma, just a bruised slash mark. It was just there, no blood flowed out. But Orgrim could feel that the bones under the muscles were slightly broken, and the internal organs were also injured. But this is nothing. For a monster like him with a strong self-healing physique, it is not a serious injury. Then, Orgrim looked towards Newgate again. I saw him standing with a knife in his hand, a smile on his lips, and he was unscathed. That's right, unscathed. At the moment of contact, Orgrim had already felt it. Newgate actually unleashed his awakening power without hesitation. His punch was a hit, but it didn't hurt Newgate at all. Cool la 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 la, what about being decisive and not decisive? Orgrim, don't take it for granted. I am very serious. There is no reason. I have to wait until it gets dark and you become stronger. Use this power, right? Newgate laughed. Gee ha 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 ha, you are right, but I thought too much. Orgrim also laughed. Newgate didn't talk nonsense anymore. He suddenly exerted force under his feet and changed his offensive and defensive positions. Air shock, Newgate shouted in a low voice. He slashed out Konjai with a knife in his hand. Orgrim used his arms to bring the force of impact, and shouted loudly, the tiger roars and the dragon roars. The force of the impact turned into a dragon and a tiger, condensed on his arms, and hit Newgate's Kongyunki. At this time, Orgrim felt a little emotional in his heart. Newgate, the old man guy, he is really no worse than he was back then. It can even be said that he has clearly realized that his physical fitness has declined slightly, so he pays more attention to the skills and rhythm of fighting than he did back then. In terms of consciousness, he is stronger. Previously, he had been creating the illusion that he was on the right foot and not falling behind. Because of this, he, Orgrim, fell into Newgate's rhythm without knowing it. But he, thinking that the rhythm is in his own hands. For this reason, he put aside the warhammer and chose to attack Newgate. Sure enough, the old guy was waiting for this opportunity. As soon as he took off his warhammer, Newgate understood the opportunity. Here he is. He used the awakened power without hesitation, and wounded himself in an instant. At the same time, he changed his offensive and defensive positions. Now, the initiative in the battle is in his hands. With a fierce blow, he holding Newgate's Kongyunki, on the other arm, the downhill tiger roared, and together with the arm, hit Newgate. Before it gets dark, the time is mine, not yours, Newgate said with a smile on his lips. Without any intention of resisting Orgrim's punch, he raised his foot and kicked Orgrim's chest violently. Boom! One punch hit, but it still felt wrong. Looking carefully, there is a thin layer of invisible energy around Newgate's body. The extremely strong impact of Orgrim's fist was blocked by this thin force. Back then, it was so obvious that Newgate used the power of awakening. But now, his control over this power is obviously even weaker. It's not easy to notice, but it's still powerful. Presumably, it will save more physical energy consumption, right? Without even retracting his thoughts, Orgrim was kicked out by Newgate. His feet plowed two deep marks on the ground. Orgrim withstood the powerful vibration force, and said with a smile on his lips, "You are not ashamed to speak." As soon as he finished speaking, the impact force on his body first it exploded out, and then quickly collapsed inwards. All were taken into the body. Bang 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 bang. From a distance, Newgate seemed to hear Orgrim's powerful heartbeat. Then, Orgrim's skin quickly turned red. His eyes were also bloodshot. Orgrim's figure lowered slightly, and at the same time, the already strong muscles seemed to become tighter. There was a solemn look in Newgate's eyes. He didn't know what was going on. It seemed a bit like the method Orgrim used to stimulate his body and force him to be violent, but it seemed to be a little more powerful than that. However, there was no doubt that Orgrim had become stronger than before. It doesn't have a name. If you want to hear it, you might as well call it the Imperial Engine, Orgrim said wickedly. The moment he finished speaking, he exerted force under his feet, and his figure was ejected like a cannonball. The air was instantly squeezed by him, making a roaring sound. Newgate's eyes flashed. He didn't dare to be too big this time. He raised his hand and threw Kongyunki directly into the air. Then he crossed his arms and blocked it in front of him. The next second, Orgrim's powerful iron fist hit the point where Newgate's arms were crossed. Newgate's tall figure was pressed down by a punch, and he slid back a few meters with his feet. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 595. Blocked Orgrim's fierce blow. Not to be outdone, Newgate used his arms to force himself away from Orgrim's fist. At the same time, he kicked Orgrim with one foot and grabbed the void with one hand. The atmosphere seemed to be caught by Newgate, and 5 fingers pulled out 5 folds in the void. Orgrim blocked Newgate's kick at this time, and was about to make a move when he felt his foot slip. Is the island tilting? Newgate seemed to be waiting for this moment. With his other hand, he punched Orgrim on the shoulder with a trembling force. Pressure, extremely strong pressure. These 2 fast-paced attacks caught Orgrim off guard. As his feet slid away, he was hit by Newgate again, and Orgrim's figure was immediately knocked to the ground. The trembling power first penetrated Orgrim's body, and then shattered the ground together. Newgate's punch drove Orgrim into the ground. But it was only for a moment. In the next moment, Orgrim grabbed Newgate's wrist. Pull it down sharply. In terms of strength, although Newgate is also an extremely powerful monster, Orgrim is even better. This tug forced Newgate to stagger, and his body was lowered involuntarily. At the same time, with this force, Orgrim's figure bounced up from the ground, with a weapon-like domineering aura on his head, and he hit Newgate's head with a fierce headbutt. There was a muffled bang. Newgate was pushed back 2 steps by the impact. Due to the defense of the awakening power, it was not a serious injury. Orgrim climbed up from the ground, his eyes flashed fiercely, and without even a pause, he ran directly into Newgate's arms. The next second, Orgrim put his arms around Newgate's waist and lifted him up from the ground. Newgate was shocked and angry, and struck Orgrim in the back with his elbow. Orgrim did not let go because of this. He exerted force with his feet, pressed his shoulders against Newgate's abdomen, and rushed away. The figures of the 2 men first broke a thick tree, and then broke a solid rock. The speed of Orgrim's feet continued unabated, and Newgate raised his hand and punched Orgrim's back a few more times. Cough, Orgrim endured this power, and 2 traces of blood spilled from the corners of his mouth. The next moment, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and Newgate seemed to realize something and turned around to look, with a look of surprise in his eyes. Tomahawk? The battle axe that has stood on the island for more than 100 years. Orgrim's goal was there. Like a bull, he pushed against Newgate's figure and hit the indestructible battle axe. Asshole, Newgate swore angrily. The next second, his lower back was directly hit by Orgrim on the narrow handle of the battle axe. A powerful impact followed. Newgate grinned, showing a painful expression. However, with this force, his feet also stepped on the ground again, without any pause at all, and the knee struck from bottom to top, knocking Orgrim out of his arms. Orgrim slid back a few steps, stood firm, and laughed loudly. Gee ha 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 ha, how is it, has the back problem been cured? You bastard, you are really despicable, Newgate cursed. But the next moment, he burst out laughing and said, that's it. This is the real battle. In order to win, you will do anything you can. This is what pirates are. Cool la 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 la, the words as soon as it fell, the vibrating energy in Newgate's hand condensed on his fist, and he punched Orgrim from a distance. Orgrim laughed loudly and did not retreat. The impact force from his fist exploded out. 2 forces exploded in the air, setting off a burst of smoke. At the same time, 2 figures also broke into the smoke. A fierce battle broke out again. At the same time, on the Black Narwhal, Queen Stussy was looking at the sky. A warship with a navy flag slowly stopped in the sky. Don't cover up, be honest and above board. But precisely because of this, Her Majesty the Queen can also understand the meaning expressed in the Navy's speechless words. We just take a look and never interfere. Her Majesty the Queen did not doubt whether the Navy was deceiving. Because there is no need to doubt it. As long as the Navy's brain is not broken, it is impossible to dare to do any small tricks here. On the warship, Jun held a monocular telescope and was observing the situation on the island. Fujitora smiled and stood beside her, and asked softly, Moby Dick and the Black Narwhal are down there. You are really big-hearted. What if they attack us? Impossible. Just like we don't dare to take action here, we also don't dare to take action on those two ships, because once we do it, there will be movement. No matter how big the movement is, it will always affect Orgrim, and the showdown in Newgate is something they don't want to see, so don't look at it like this. In fact, we are safe, at least it's safe until those two monsters show off, Jun said without looking back. Then, before Fujitora smiled and spoke, Jun said again, well done, blow that bastard's head off. Fujitora smiled and was stunned for a moment, then asked what's going on. Ha 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 ha, that bastard Orgrim seems to be at a disadvantage, Jun laughed heartily. It's like Orgrim's is not Newgate, but her Jun. She is so happy. Fujitora smiled and looked at Jun's excited face with a toothache. Looking back, he couldn't help but shake his head and said, sure enough, women are very vindictive. I don't know how Orgrim offended this woman. Orgrim will lose, Fujitora asked with a smile. As soon as he finished speaking, the smile on Jun's face froze. Then, she put down the telescope, shook her head and said, not necessarily, don't look at Orgrim now. He was at a disadvantage, but his physical fitness did not put too much pressure on him. What's more, it was still daylight, and Orgrim's terrifying strength was, theoretically speaking, only half of it. You know, does this mean anything? Fujitora was just a private master before he smiled. Although he was strong, he was alone and helpless, and did not understand many of the secrets of the top masters in the sea. On the contrary, Jun was a serious academic. She was born and grew up to this point with the help of the Navy. She knew all the countless masters on the sea clearly. Listening to Jun's question, Fujitora smiled and shook his head. What does it mean? This means that once Newgate is unable to establish a strong advantage before dark, he will fall into an absolute disadvantage in the dark, Jun said softly. Fujitora smiled and then nodded, then frowned slightly and said, is that guy Orgrim really that strong? Can even Whitebeard suppress him in the dark night? You haven't played against him, so you can't empathize with him, right? That rascal, he is a monster that will make everyone despair. Jun recalled the several battles she had with Orgrim and murmured with some emotion. She fully understands Orgrim's power. As long as you lose to him once, I'm afraid you won't be able to beat him again. Newgate never lost to Orgrim, but it tied once. From Jun's point of view, this is enough. Although I really don't want to admit it, and I don't want to see that damn scene, I have to say that Orgrim has a better chance of winning in this duel, Jun said helplessly. Fujitora smiled and nodded thoughtfully, and said no more. He was wondering, had he made the wrong bet before? That's right, he secretly placed a bet on the gambling board of the Dark World. And embarrassingly, he bet that Whitebeard would win. If I had known this, I should have asked Jun earlier. Just when Fujitora smiled and thought about these messy things, Jun asked, how long until it gets dark? Fujitora smiled and looked at the sky, then took out a pocket watch from his arms, took a look at it and said 2 hours. This battle may end sooner than we expected, Jun put down the telescope again and said with a serious expression. Fujitora smiled and was stunned for a moment, then asked why. Because Orgrim seems to be getting stronger, Jun said solemnly. Because of the dark night? Fujitora asked in surprise with a smile. Then, before Jun could speak, Fujitora smiled and said, isn't that right? Even if it gets dark, a man like Newgate wouldn't be able to survive a dark night, right? Jun did not speak, but once again used the telescope to observe the situation on the island, staring at Orgrim's figure. After a long time, she seemed to be sure of something, and said with a somewhat helpless tone, Orgrim, that bastard's ability might be awakened. What? Fujitora smiled and was stunned. Ability awakening? At this moment, the impact power on Orgrim's body continued to overflow outwards. The rich impact power seemed to wrap him up, invisible and transparent, the erotic power entangled in his body, appearing and disappearing. Although Newgate had the upper hand at this time, with the power of the powerful awakening of the shock fruit, he was able to offset most of Orgrim's attacks. Almost. He didn't suffer any injuries. Instead, he pressed Orgrim hard and hit him again. The injuries on his body kept accumulating. But Newgate's expression did not look relaxed. Jun, as an animal type and phantom beast species ability, she could see that the abilities in Orgrim's body were awakened. So how could Newgate, who was also a superhuman ability user and awakened person like Orgrim, find out? No. The pressure you put on Orgrim seems to be constantly breaking the shackles on him. In this case, the best choice seems to be to stop and not put this kind of pressure on Orgrim. But at this moment, how could it be possible to stop? This is a battle between two people, how could one person call it quits? At the same time, Newgate was also proud. He was a Whitebeard, and fighting could be despicable, but people must have courage. If you stop now, doesn't it mean that you are afraid of the awakening of Orgrim's fruit ability? If you have this mentality, why bother to fight this fight to be the strongest? So what if you awaken? If you want to fight, just fight. If you want to fight happily, you must fight with the strongest strength. Only the brave ones can seize the future in the angry sea. Koo-la-la-la-la, you bastard, just let me help you. Newgate laughed boldly. The trembling power in his hand burst out again and punched Orgrim. Orgrim was directly knocked away by this blow. But he wasn't angry about anything. After landing, he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said with a ferocious smile, "Thank you so much, old guy." As soon as he finished speaking, Orgrim didn't feel like he was at a disadvantage at all. His momentum was even better, like a tiger descending from the mountain, and he rushed towards Newgate bravely. That thank you was sincere. For this reason, he will repay Newgate with an all-out battle. Presumably, this must be the best reward, right? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 596. On the sea level, the sun is gradually sinking, and half of it has fallen into the sea. On the Moby Dick, Marco's expression gradually became serious. Everyone on the sea knows that Orgrim's power cannot be fully exerted during the day. And within the night, Orgrim will be extremely powerful. At this time, it seems that there is not much time left for Dad. He finally started to worry about his father, will lose. On the contrary, on the black narwhal, a smile gradually appeared on Stussy's lips. As long as Orgrim doesn't lose to Newgate in daylight, then he will definitely win. On the island, Orgrim's injuries became more and more obvious. There was blood spilling from the corners of his mouth, and there was a cut on his forehead, which was also dripping with blood. The chest was cut by Newgate's Kongyun, and a cut was made, and the bones were deeply visible. There are also many black and swollen bruises on the muscles. But there was a smile on his face, a wild smile. It's like he has the upper hand now. On the contrary, Newgate had no obvious injuries and he was in pretty good condition. In the current battle situation, he has the upper hand. But Newgate's expression was very serious. It's getting dark soon. And the impact force on Orgrim's body became more and more intense, so intense that it could no longer be restrained from his body. Wake up! It seems that there is only one step left before Orgrim is about to awaken. Old guy, are you ready? Orgrim stretched out his hand to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth and asked with a grin. Newgate inserted the hilt of Kongyunki's knife into the ground and stood it beside him. Then he took out his free hand and shot at the powerful trembling power condensed in his hands. "Don't underestimate me, I'll give you a ride," Newgate said in a deep voice. The moment the words fell, Newgate's feet suddenly exerted force, and the strong figure rushed towards Orgrim. Orgrim did not hesitate at all, and took a deep breath. Also exerted force under his feet, and bumped into Newgate. There was no name for the move. It was a simple punch, but wherever the wind of Newgate's fist passed, the space was shattered and trembled. The power seems to be able to destroy everything. The same goes for Orgrim, who has no name for his moves. He just punched Newgate's extremely powerful fist. The powerful impact seemed to be able to destroy everything that stood in front of him. Everything. The two fists intersected. The space exploded directly, but Orgrim and Newgate tightened their feet and held onto the ground. No one was thrown away by the space explosion. The two of them, wherever the fist was, the surrounding space turned into a pitch-black hole. Powerful pressure was continuously transmitted from the fist. Newgate's awakening power continued to release tremors, shaking. Orgrim's impact force was slowly suppressed. Severe pain was felt in his arm, and the trembling force was continuously transmitted to his body along the muscles and bones of his arm. In just a short moment, the whole arm seemed to be losing consciousness. Then, it spread from the shoulders again. The chest, internal organs, lower limbs, and even the soles of the feet. There seemed to be no place in the whole body that was not hurting, and no place was not shaking. Orgrim's throat surged, and the blood at the corners of his mouth couldn't stop flowing outwards. His eyes were red, and the whites of his eyes were bloodshot. It seemed that his ears could no longer hear any sounds. A subtle and steady tremor filled his ears. A trembling hiss. For a moment, Orgrim's consciousness seemed to drift. He just wanted to do nothing, not care about anything. Leave here quietly. Leave this world. But soon, his mind became clear. Then, he felt a feeling that he had not felt for a long time. Losing control. The rich and powerful impact force in his body began to break away from his control. The last time he felt this way, it was more than 20 years ago. At that time, he snatched the poison fruit and obtained the shock fruit. When he ate the devil fruit for the first time, the sudden power he gained was out of control, making his movements very inconvenient. And this long-lost feeling of losing control came again. Somewhere in the body, in the mind, and even in the whole world, it seemed as if some shackles had been broken. Orgrim uttered an unintelligible murmur. Newgate noticed that Orgrim's black pupils gradually disappeared, replaced by bloodshot whites. Newgate was startled, as if he had realized something. Loss of power. When he awakened his ability, he also experienced this loss of control. At the same time, he briefly lost consciousness. This seems to be a necessary stage for the awakening of superhuman abilities. Even Newgate cannot confirm this, because he has not seen too many superhuman abilities awakened, and for those with abilities who have already awakened. These are very valuable experiences and secrets. How could you tell others casually? Just when Newgate's thoughts had not yet settled, the impact force that he had suppressed on Orgrim's body instantly counterattacked. A powerful impact burst out from Orgrim's head and shot straight into the sky. The dark clouds in the sky were directly dispersed. The next moment, the trembling power that Newgate suppressed in Orgrim's body was swept away. At the same time, Newgate could feel that the power coming from his fist was becoming more and more powerful. Click. It's not just where two fists meet. The space around the two of them began to shatter. This moment finally, Newgate felt the pressure from his fist gradually getting stronger. Then, he discovered that Orgrim's black pupils appeared again. Has consciousness returned? Orgrim could feel at this time that the out-of-control power was gradually recovering, and he was able to control the surging impact force in his body. Strengthen bit by bit, expand bit by bit. In the end, the source of everything converged in his strong, beating heart. When the last bit of impact force fell into his body again and was controlled by him again, there was a slight strange sound in his mind, which he couldn't explain clearly. It was as if a string had been broken, and as if some of the shackles that had imprisoned him had been completely torn apart. Not good, Newgate was startled, and the power on his arm quickly withdrew. The powerful trembling power enveloped himself in the blink of an eye, and the awakened power laid down a very strong defense. Orgrim was still there at this time. He was a little confused. Before he could react, he felt the pressure exerted by Newgate on his arm dissipate. The next second, as soon as he came back to his senses, his eyes were filled with darkness. Then, there was a violent space explosion. It brought up an unparalleled powerful airflow and directly flew his whole body away. At the same time, Newgate did not escape this wave of explosion, and his figure also flew out upside down. Jun watched this scene from the warship in the sky. His face was very surprised. The powerful aftermath continued to overflow. Fortunately, with the blessing of Fujitora Uxiao's ability, he was able to withstand this power. The warship is relatively stable. What's going on? Fujitoro looked at that scene with a smile and asked with some surprise. Limit, Jun murmured softly. However, her tone was not very sure. Because she has never seen this scene before. Limit. Fujitora smiled and said in surprise. I don't know very well, but at that moment, it seemed that it was really the limit. Newgate's power and Orgrim's power, to some extent, merged together, and they arrived in this world. What they could bear the limit, perhaps, that is the real ceiling in terms of strength. Neither the world nor the space can bear this kind of power, so it was broken, so a seemingly inconspicuous but really powerful space explosion occurred, killing the two people. All the power was interrupted, Jun said in a deep voice. These are all her guesses. She has never really seen this kind of scene, she just made inferences based on the situation. But in fact, it is pretty much what she guessed. At that moment just now, Ogre Mew's power and Newgate's power, to some extent, merged for a moment. And that moment broke the limits of the world. The world responded to them. If this is really what you guessed, Orgrim, Fujitora smiled incredulously and murmured. Jun's face was very serious, but with a touch of worry between his brows, he said softly, perhaps, he will become the strongest at the limit, the kind whose strength reaches the ceiling. It was still dark at this time, and when Orgrim and Newgate joined forces, they could reach the limit. And once it gets dark, with Orgrim's strange night power and talent, even without Newgate, he will reach his limit, right? Extremely powerful. Overwhelmingly powerful. Unparalleled in the world, truly invincible? Fujitora swallowed with a smile and said softly. Jun did not speak, but turned his head to look at the sea level in the distance. Only a trace of the sun remained on the sea surface. Dusk, Jun murmured. Then, she turned to look at the island again and whispered, twilight, according to legend, is the moment when night and day alternate, the shadow and light of the world merge, and the realms of life and death merge, is the easiest. When you encounter the devil, Fujitora smiled and seemed to have heard this legend too, and continued what Jun said. That's right, when you encounter the devil, and the devil of this world seems to have appeared, Jun whispered. At the same time, Orgrim, who had rolled countless times on the ground, finally stopped. He got up from the ground in great embarrassment. The injury was quite serious at this time. Wasn't it Newgate who brought him this, but the world's backlash against him? He now recalled the moment just now. It seemed that he and Newgate had reached the limit together. The real ceiling of this world. But it only took a moment before he was counterattacked. At that time, I was awakening my power and could not make any effective response. Newgate, on the other hand, seems to have made the right response. He shouldn't have been seriously injured. But I seem to be miserable. But, at this moment, he felt powerful, new power. Then, the power of night in the body seemed to wake up. When the last ray of sunlight in the sky dissipated, Orgrim exhaled a sigh of relief. The already extremely powerful aura on him gradually began to rise again. The injuries and bruises on the body's surface quickly began to dissipate. The night is coming, and so is the king of the night. The ground seemed unable to withstand the pressure brought by Orgrim's momentum. The ground beneath his feet was slowly crushed and cracks appeared. In the distance, Newgate's face was very solemn, and his eyes were fixed on Orgrim. He could feel that Orgrim's strength began to rise. It was different from the feeling during the Battle of Butter Island. This time, he has new powers and becomes more powerful. That's the real strength. Orgrim felt the change in power and whispered softly. Then, he turned his head and looked at Newgate, who was waiting solemnly, and said with a grin, "Thanks to you, I seem to have entered a new realm." "That's really congratulations," Newgate said softly. "In return, I will be the first to show you this power," Orgrim smiled. As soon as he finished speaking, he stepped on it, and his figure turned into a black shadow, seeming to be completely integrated into the night and disappeared. This moment is the time to encounter the devil. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 597. Powerful, extremely powerful. The moment Orgrim's figure disappeared, Newgate's domineering power reached its limit. Want to capture Orgrim's figure? But even with the perspective of the strongest man, he can only capture a moment. It was not for any other reason, but because in just a moment, Orgrim had already arrived at his side. This speed is like crossing time and space. Newgate was startled and pressed his arms down, as if to resist Orgrim's attack. But the moment his arm was pressed down, Orgrim's fist rubbed the edge of his arm and penetrated his chest. With extremely fast speed, he broke through this resistance. There is still no name for the move, it looks like a simple punch. But this punch carried a very strong impact. Far from before, the power Orgrim used was so powerful that it broke through the limits. The trembling power gathered in Newgate's chest seemed unable to withstand Orgrim's impact this time. There was a pain in his chest, and Newgate couldn't even react. The ground he was clinging to beneath his feet was lifted. Then, his tall figure rose from the ground. When he realized it, he had already been knocked away. Cough, Newgate couldn't help spitting out a mouthful of blood. The tall figure was like a cannonball, flying backwards with great force. Orgrim's figure did not pursue him. On the contrary, his movements stopped, and his figure stood directly where Newgate was before. The aura on his body is extremely powerful. And his hands suddenly clasped together in front of his chest, still without any words, but the powerful impact seemed to spread out invisibly. The next moment, Newgate flew backwards on the path. A very strong shock wave suddenly appeared. The shock wave seemed to come from all directions. No medium is needed, it just feels like it appears out of thin air. This is the power of awakening. The shock waves that appeared in all directions hit Newgate at the same time. The momentum was like an overwhelming force. The aftermath completely tore the ground apart, and countless smoke and dust were lifted up, covering Newgate's figure. After this blow fell, a scarlet light flashed in Orgrim's eyes, and then disappeared. The next moment, his figure had already burst into the smoke and dust, and he locked onto Newgate's figure with a domineering look. At this time, Newgate stood up and felt severe pain all over his body. If he hadn't been protected by the awakened power of the shock fruit, he might have been seriously injured by Orgrim at that moment. This time, Newgate did not use any kind of domineering force. He already understood that with his knowledge and domineering power, there was no way he could keep up with Orgrim's speed. It might be better to leave the battle to experience and instinct. The moment he stood up, Newgate instinctively gathered a powerful trembling force on his arm and punched the air in front of him. Sure enough, the next second, Orgrim's figure appeared there, as if he had been hit by the punch. The surging trembling force hit Orgrim's chest with 10% force. The power awakened by Orgrim is not particularly conspicuous, nor does it have strong defensive power like Newgate. With this blow, Orgrim's chest collapsed downwards, and the bones in his chest seemed to be broken. But this blow did not repel Orgrim. His elbow smoothly struck Newgate's figure. "Tyrannosaurus charging elbow," Orgrim shouted in a low voice. It was the same move as before, but the power it brought was absolutely extraordinary. His elbow hit Newgate's body quickly, and the trembling power attached to his surface. First, it resisted for a moment, withstanding part of Orgrim's power, but soon, it seemed as if it had been pierced and penetrated. Then, a powerful impact hit Newgate's body, a stream of blood overflowed from the corner of Newgate's mouth again, and his feet seemed to be about to lift off the ground, as if he was knocked away again. But this time, Newgate instinctively bent his knees and lowered his body one level. Then, he thrust in. The powerful force in his body was released from the soles of his feet, but it failed to knock him away. The ground exploded directly, but Newgate still stabilized his body. Without any hesitation, he punched with his backhand towards the Orgrim in front of him was smashed down. A very strong trembling force was thrown out towards Orgrim. And Orgrim stepped on his foot, adjusted his posture slightly, and moved from bottom to top. The punches came out. The two fists intersected, Newgate's face turned red, and the trembling force directly pressed against Orgrim's arm. Then, he felt the pain from the fists, and finally he could no longer hold the strength under his feet. The punch caused him to take 2 steps back. Every time he took a step, the ground would crack. And Orgrim was also stopped by the punch, and his ankles were all numb. Submerged into the ground. There was a smile on the corner of his mouth, as if he was very satisfied with the punch. At this time, Newgate lowered his head and glanced at his fist, the iron fist that could break everything with one punch. The broken phalanges pierced the surface of the skin and were exposed to the dusty air. Yes, Newgate's fist was severely injured by the punch just now. At the same time, Newgate seemed to understand what is the significance of Orgrim's awakened power. "Your impact, it seems to be more penetrating." Newgate raised his eyes to look at Orgrim, who was motionless, and said softly. Orgrim seemed to take his time and pulled his feet out of the ground, then grinned and said, "That's right. If Newgate's shocking fruit can finally form an extremely strong defensive force under his will, it can fill his last shortcoming. Then Orgrim's impact fruit awakening is an attack attribute, making the power of impact more aggressive and penetrating. Previously, Orgrim's impact was almost unable to break through Newgate's awakening defense. But now, even Newgate's awakened power cannot completely resist Orgrim's offensive. Perhaps, not only here, but also various factors such as the domineering aura, iron block, and unique talents. From now on, I am afraid that they will not be able to resist Orgrim's offensive. If only Charlotte Lingling could still appear at sea. Even though she has a steel frame and is called a steel balloon or something. But Orgrim was confident that he could still penetrate her proud defense with one blow. Of course, it's not just that. How can the power of awakening be so simple? However, Orgrim had just awakened at this time and could only use this power instinctively. He couldn't figure out the rest himself. But in this battle, it is enough to break Newgate's exaggerated defense. He has already grasped the chance of victory. At the same time, Orgrim's rising momentum finally slowed down. Stopped at one stage. Just now, it was just a moment after nightfall. Orgrim's power of night is gradually increasing. But now, it has reached its peak. His physical fitness and all aspects of strength have achieved qualitative transcendence. It is no exaggeration to say that I am probably the strongest in the world at this time, Newgate. Orgrim said softly. After a slight pause, he laughed again and added, it is the ultimate power, the ultimate power. Rather, after comparing with the others, he appears to be powerful. You hit that limit? Newgate asked softly. Yes, I don't know if this is the end of the power we are pursuing, and whether there is a possibility of going further in the future. But if it is really the end of power, then at this time, I have already reached the other shore and stood on the other side. At the end Orgrim nodded without hesitation. If it had been anyone else, Newgate would have been talking shamelessly to him here, saying that he was standing at the end of strength, the end of the road. Newgate would probably have laughed out loud. I feel that this guy has lost his mind and gone crazy. Or maybe he is just a clown trying to please others. But at this moment, Newgate couldn't find anything that he couldn't believe in the words spoken by Orgrim. Reason. Perhaps the man in front of him, who is just in his early 30s, has really surpassed the world and reached the end of his power in his best years, right? What does this mean? Newgate asked. As a person who has also been in the strongest position for many years. He has not touched Orgrim's state at this time, but he is still curious in his heart. So he asked. Significance? Orgrim murmured and repeated. After thinking for a while, he smiled and said, Invincible, the fight just now was just a test after I got this kind of power. You should also be able to feel what kind of power it is. To put it bluntly, at this moment, I am in a one-on-one situation. I'm afraid no one can be my opponent. After a short pause, Orgrim touched his chin again and said, although this situation has not actually happened, if we speculate, I am afraid that 5 top masters like you and me will do it. For example, if Garp, Sengoku, etc. join forces, it is impossible to defeat me. If you are lucky, you might be able to draw with me, but the greater possibility is to be defeated by me. Koo-la-la-la-la, you are so arrogant, you bastard. Newgate laughed and said. Before Orgrim could speak, Newgate smiled and asked, are you saying that there is no possibility for me to win against you now? Orgrim grinned and said with unparalleled confidence, that's right. Koo-la-la-la-la, maybe it is true, but I have to try it myself, Newgate laughed. As soon as he finished speaking, he didn't care about the injuries on his fists at all, and the powerful trembling power condensed again. And Orgrim had a smile in his eyes and said, me too, do you want to really prove it? The next moment, Orgrim's abyss-like aura was completely unleashed. Just the release of momentum made Newgate, once the strongest person, feel extremely pressured. I'm going to use all my firepower. If I can't hold on any longer, I'll let out a squeak, Orgrim laughed loudly. Before Newgate could speak, the ground suddenly burst open. Orgrim's figure was no longer there. His arms were crossed forward, and Newgate's body trembled. All the power was gathered here. The next moment, Orgrim's iron fist hit it straight. An even stronger force than before burst out, and the impact penetrated Newgate's trembling power. He stamped his feet firmly on the ground. The island seemed to be sunk by the stampede, shaking. Newgate wanted to resist the punch. But in the end, he couldn't. Drink, Orgrim shouted loudly. The power brought by the fist became even more powerful. Newgate's arms were directly pressed against his chest. Then, he spit out a mouthful of blood, and his momentum, as soon as he collapsed, his feet could no longer grasp the ground. The figure was blown away like a cannonball. At the same moment, Orgrim also chased out. Powerful impact force continued to unfold along the way. This huge island, from the sky, it looked like he was being bombed in a cluster. At this moment, Newgate couldn't find a chance to fight back and could only resist passively. And every resistance made his injuries more serious. At this moment, for the first time a thought arose in his mind. An idea that had never occurred to him before. That bastard Orgrim, unrivaled. Powerful, extremely powerful. So powerful that even he, the white-bearded Edward Newgate, has no power to fight back at this moment. Defeat seems to be a foregone conclusion. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 598. Unable to withstand Orgrim's power, Newgate was knocked to the ground with a violent blow. Cough, he couldn't help spitting out a mouthful of blood again. He was supporting himself with his arms, as if he was trying to get up from the ground. But the next moment, Orgrim's powerful fist punched him on the chest mercilessly, knocking him directly into the ground. The next moment, Newgate was never given any chance. Heavy punches fell on Newgate like raindrops. Punch after punch, no stopping at all. Bang 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 bang. The sound of heavy boxing came out with a slight rhythm. Newgate tried to struggle, but could not. If it were really a one-person duel, I'm afraid there would be no one who could be Orgrim's enemy. Even if it's a white-beard. At this moment, he had absolutely no power to fight back. There was severe pain in his body, and Newgate resisted instinctively. But his thoughts, at this moment, were actually a little hazy. Defeated, this thought came to his mind. It's been many years since I've felt this way. Defeat, it's not like Whitebeard has never failed before. Back then, I was fighting fiercely with Roger, Shiji, Garp and other bastards on the sea. There are winners and losers between each of them. But after retreating from Shiji, Roger died, and the navy was driven out of the New World. For many years, he has been sitting in the strongest position. Never lost. At worst, it's just a tie with Orgrim. He even thought about whether he would lose again. But now, it seems that defeat, has become a foregone conclusion. For a moment, he felt a little relieved and a little emotional. What is relieved is that this era no longer belongs to him after all. What makes me sigh is that I will come to an end from my strongest position, right? Does this count as a loss? Judging from the results, it should be a loss. He had to admit that he was no match for this monster man like Orgrim. But judging from this life, it seems that he has not lost. He had seen the scenery at the highest point. In his opinion, he also found the most precious treasure in the sea. For decades, he had experienced everything he had to experience while sailing on the sea. How can such a life be called losing? He has gone through the most exciting eras, and has fought against the most outstanding heroes of every era. This adventure can be called the ultimate luxury. There are no regrets in his life. A smile appeared from the corner of his mouth. The surging trembling power in his body quickly dissipated. Strong men from several eras. The man who once sat on the most powerful throne. Whitebeard Edward Newgate, at this moment, calmly accepted his defeat. He admitted defeat. Perhaps, dying at the hands of Orgrim is a good ending, Newgate thought so in his heart. But the next moment, Orgrim's extremely powerful iron fist struck hard, grazing his ear and hitting the broken ground hard. Then, the violent storm-like offensive also stopped. Seeing Newgate giving up his resistance, Orgrim felt a little emotional. Then, he said in a funny way, "Old guy, are you planning to seek death?" Newgate's eyes, which were originally closed, opened again. Feeling the severe pain coming from his body, he couldn't help but grin. He didn't know how many bones in his body were broken and cracked. But it was obvious that the injury was extremely serious. After this battle, I'm afraid my strength will no longer be at its peak. How? You bastard, are you not ready to kill me? Newgate endured the pain in his body and asked. Orgrim was sitting on Newgate's body at this time. He did not speak, but moved his body. The powerful aura on his body gradually dissipated, and sat cross-legged next to Newgate. One person was lying on the ground, and the other was sitting cross-legged on the ground. The original fierce fighting posture dissipated completely in the blink of an eye. Have you ever thought about killing me? Orgrim did not answer, but instead asked. Newgate's eyes looked at the star-studded night sky. After a long time, he said, if a guy like you dies, wouldn't it be a loss to the sea? There was no clear answer, but the meaning was obvious. Newgate had never thought about killing Orgrim if he defeated him. Orgrim laughed. This was not unexpected. For the same reason, the relationship between him and Newgate is a mutual attraction between the strong, and a hostility in stance. In terms of personal relationship, he and Newgate have no hatred at all. On the contrary, the two of them admire each other. They all recognized each other very much. In this case, what reason did Newgate have to kill him? Then you say, why should I kill you? Orgrim smiled and said. Newgate was silent for a while, and then said, it seems to be the truth. But, you bastard, you don't think so simple, do you? The Navy wants to enter the New World, Orgrim said without thinking. When Newgate heard this, he couldn't help laughing and said, is that really true? There is no doubt that the Navy led by warring states will not be willing to be lonely. Otherwise, why would they fight for the gateway sea of the New World in this war? It has been foreseen that in the future, the New World will usher in the Navy, the maritime hegemon, once again involved. Facing the Navy is not Orgrim's problem alone. This is what is about to happen to the pirate forces in the entire New World. It doesn't make sense, Orgrim was in front alone the whole time, right? In this case, people with personal vendettas like Charlotte Lingling are unlikely to have any cooperation or involvement with Orgrim, and will only cause trouble for him. Orgrim will naturally be eradicated without mercy. Now Charlotte Lingling lay down. But Newgate is different. Newgate has no personal enmity with him, Orgrim. It is also an extremely important force among the pirates of the New World. Now, Newgate has accepted his defeat. So presumably, with his mind and structure, he won't really hold a grudge. The dispute between the two that has lasted for many years has come to a conclusion. And Newgate should also understand that given his age, he will never have another chance to compete with Orgrim in the future. The competition between the two of them for the title of strongest has come to an end. Without the hostility, the two of them don't have to fight for life or death. Especially at this moment when the Navy is eyeing it. Killing Newgate is equivalent to breaking up the Whitebeard pirates, and the New World Yonko will fall again. Orgrim may gain certain benefits, but it is of little significance. On the contrary, the happiest person must be the Navy. Can Orgrim make the Navy so happy? As long as you lose to me, everything will change in the New World. I will definitely become the strongest pirate overlord in the New World. Your life and death will not have much impact at all. It is nothing more than the benefits I get, which is slightly less. I only paid a little, but my family has a big business and I don't care about your 3 melons and 2 dates. You are also the poorest one anyway, Orgrim waved his hand and said. Really arrogant, Newgate said softly. But he also had to admit that Orgrim was right. As long as he loses, the New World will become a place where Orgrim has the final say. Among the pirates, there was no voice that could oppose him. Although he failed to truly become king, Orgrim was already the pirate overlord of the New World. In this way, the main conflict Orgrim will face will be transferred from the pirate camp to the Navy camp. The Navy wants to re-enter the New World. This is a challenge to Orgrim's authority. Newgate could also see that Orgrim, like himself, was not looking for Rafdru to become the so-called pirate king. But it is different from myself. I no longer have any idea of fighting. And Orgrim wants to find a new royal path. Now, he has dominated the pirate camp in the New World. So, how should he find a new path and become the pirate king in his heart? There is no doubt about the power to defeat the Navy headquarters. Smash the Navy headquarters' ambition to create a new world. Defend his kingship in the New World. Prove to the whole world that he can handle not just pirates, but even the navy, which is known as the overlord of the sea, he can handle it. Only when he reached that point could he truly secure the new world kingship he had just won. By then, he will naturally ascend to the throne of pirates. With absolute power, become the new king of pirates. This is the path Orgrim chose to become the pirate king, right? Maybe, Orgrim said casually. Then, he stood up and did not help Newgate. Instead, he turned around and prepared to leave. This battle will determine the strongest battle. It seems like this, ended simply. Nothing too earth-shattering, but it will definitely affect the pattern of the future world. Just when Orgrim took a few steps, Newgate sat up and called to him, made a sound. What to do? Orgrim turned around and asked. Go back and tell Shiji that I invited him to come to my boat for a drink, Newgate spoke. Orgrim was stunned for a moment, then left. He understood what Newgate meant. From then on, the two were no longer hostile. After smiling, Orgrim waved his hand and said, I know, but with your body, it won't be good if you continue to drink. Koo-la-la-la-la, if you don't drink, what else can you do as a pirate? Newgate laughed. Orgrim didn't respond, smiled, turned, and left. At the same time, on the warship in the sky, Jun also slowly put away the telescope. Her expression was a bit complex. Originally, I thought this would be a fierce battle that would last for many days and be earth-shattering, with the entire island going to be destroyed. After all, this was to determine the strongest battle in the world. But the pace of the battle was so fast, but it was far beyond everyone's expectation. In less than a day, not long after the genius had just darkened, Orgrim had already defeated Newgate and won the title of the strongest. This really seemed a bit anticlimactic. But thinking about it again, when Orgrim awakened his power, the outcome of the battle seemed to have been determined. It was unexpected. But it was also reasonable. And behind this seemingly simple battle, there was something unexpected. It also has extraordinary significance. Newgate lost, and his loss was even a bit of a child's play. But he was once the strongest in the world without water. People like him, in Orgrim in his hands, he lost so easily. So how powerful is Orgrim at this time? Really, can anyone defeat him? Suddenly, Jun seemed to think of a rumor on the sea. The knight belongs to Hosgarot Orgrim. Perhaps in the past, these words had some substance. But now, even she, as a navy, had to agree. Powerful, extremely powerful. Orgrim arrived on the other side. With them, is no longer a level person. From now on, there will still be a sequence of top masters in the sea. But above this sequence, there is a new level of power. This level will be call it Orgrim. Perhaps, you can also call it the other side and the end of power. The real world is the strongest. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 599. Previously, Jun had lost to Orgrim many times. He also knew that there was a certain gap in strength between himself and Orgrim. But she still wanted to compete with Orgrim. But now, she seems to have lost this thought. Orgrim is definitely not something that one person can defeat. If you want to defeat him, you may have to concentrate the vast majority of the Navy's power on a siege. But Avalon and the Warhammer pirates are not alone in Orgrim. How can the Navy defeat such a monster? She couldn't understand. There is even a feeling of despair in my heart. Give up. But soon, Jun shook his head and said solemnly, I will never give up. At this moment, Fujitora smiled and asked in a serious tone, what should we do now? What should we do now? Fujitora smiled and actually had some ideas. He had also thought before that if Newgate and Orgrim really fought, both sides would lose. So can they fish in troubled waters? Even if they have to stand up to each other later, the two big pirates revenge. But it seems that no matter who is caught or killed, it's all worth it. But now, Fujitora smiled and put aside this thought. It's not a lose-lose situation. When night fell, Orgrim crushed Newgate with absolute superiority and unrivaled power. Winning and losing come too fast. Perhaps, now we can deal with Newgate. But this would really anger Orgrim. Navy, are you ready to deal with such a terrifying monster? Obviously, no. Then, he can't act rashly. Jun was stunned for a moment, then smiled bitterly and said, what else can we do? Evacuate. There is no room for us to appear here. This matter must be reported to the headquarters as quickly as possible. At the port, the Moby Dick and the Black Narwhal stopped again. Orgrim found his warhammer again and then wandered here. Marco also happened to get off the Moby Dick. The two met together. When Orgrim was Shiki's right-hand man, the two had a duel. Even that duel wasn't fair, with Jaws helping him Marco. But in the end, they still lost. Nowadays, Orgrim is no longer Shiki's right-hand man, he is the captain of the Warhammer Pirates. A duel involving the strongest begins with his own captain. And Orgrim still won. This made Marco feel very complicated. Looking at Orgrim's figure, thoughts abounded. Orgrim didn't pay attention to Marco and wanted to walk past him. But at this moment, Marco suddenly said Orgrim. Orgrim stopped and turned to look at Marco, with a hint of doubt in his eyes. Wonder what Marco is going to do? It seems that his relationship with Marco is not that good, right? Would he want to vent his anger on his father? Challenge yourself? That's really stupid. Just when Orgrim was thinking about all this, Marco had hesitation on his face, but in the end, he still said thank you for being merciful. Gee ha 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 ha, Orgrim laughed. Then, he walked towards Marco, reached out and patted him on the shoulder, and said you are dead. When Newgate knows this thank you, especially thanking me for being merciful, he will definitely let him you are beautiful. Marco was stunned for a moment, it seems like this is what happened. But before he could speak, Orgrim said with a serious expression at the same time, don't get me wrong, I have no mercy. That old guy of yours is a respectable opponent. I will never show mercy to such an opponent. As for at last, that's just. Having said this, he looked up at the sky and saw the G-5 warship that was sailing away. He smiled evilly and said, I just don't want those bastards who think they are righteous to laugh too happily. After saying that, ignoring Marco, Orgrim patted him on the shoulder again, turned around and left very calmly. Marco looked at Orgrim's back and didn't speak for a long time. In the end, he shook his head, smiled bitterly and said perhaps I will never be able to catch up with your bastard in this life. As soon as he finished speaking, a flash of blue flame ignited on his body, his arms turned into wings, and he flew towards the island to find his father. At the same time, at Naval Headquarters Marineford, the Warring States Marshal was drinking tea. He was not anxious about anything, nor did he appear to be in a hurry. In his expectation, the duel between top players like Orgrim and Newgate was a duel, especially a duel for the title of the strongest. It has to take 3 to 5 days to really decide the winner, right? So he was not in a hurry at all. Sitting opposite him was Lieutenant General Garp. Garp was eating senbei and asked, although Orgrim is expected to win, how far do you think they can fight? Marshal Sengoku thought about it. After a moment, he said it can't be worse than Butter Island, right? I think Orgrim may win, but in terms of strength, he and Newgate, there shouldn't be an obvious imbalance. The main reason is that he is young and has better physical fitness than Newgate. But even so, it will take at least 3 days, right? I think so, Garp nodded. In fact, this is also the prediction of many masters in the sea. Whether it is predicting that Whitebeard will win, or predicting that Orgrim will win the title of the strongest. In short, most people think that, no matter how they fight, these two people have to fight for 3 days and 3 nights, right? But at this moment, the phone on the tea table in front of the two people rang. The Warring States Marshal looked down and said with some surprise, "Yes, Jun. Isn't she on the front line? Could it be that something unexpected happened?" "Someone intervened in the duel between those two bastards," Garp asked in surprise. Marshal Warring States was also a little puzzled, but he quickly answered the phone. "Jun? What happened?" Marshal Warring States asked. "Marshal boss, the duel between Orgrim and Newgate is over, the winner is Orgrim," Jun said softly. Marshal Sengoku looked shocked and said, "Impossible. How can it be? How long did it take for the two of them to start? Not even a day has arrived. How could it be over?" Garp was also shocked and asked involuntarily, "Is there something wrong with Newgate's body? Was Orgrim taken advantage of?" Remembering that Newgate has experienced countless battles, his physical fitness is not so terrible. In such fierce battle conditions, it seems that it is not impossible for old injuries to recur. Marshal Warring States also had such speculations in his mind. But the next second, Jun said in a deep voice, "No, Orgrim defeated Newgate in an upright manner, and with absolute advantage and unrivaled power. This, what is going on? Can his power be raised to this level in the Dark Night?" Marshal Sengoku couldn't help but ask. He didn't question Jun anymore, because it was impossible for Jun to joke about this kind of thing. There was silence on the phone, and then Jun said, "Orgrim's devil fruit power awakens." Marshal Warring States and Lieutenant General Garp both fell silent after hearing this. His expression became extremely serious. Orgrim is strong enough on his own. Physical fitness, strength, and ability are all excellent. And very young. The fact that he can reach the strongest position is already quite impressive. But Orgrim is not without flaws. Orgrim's flaw is his ability to develop. I don't know what's going on with this guy, but in short, his development of fruit-impacting abilities has always been a bit simple and crude. But if you think about it more carefully, an ability like this seems to be simple and crude. But no matter what, this kind of simplicity and crudeness has its limits. On Butter Island, Newgate used the awakening of ability. With that extremely strong defense, Orgrim had no way to do anything. We can only fight a war of attrition. In the end, the island will sink and there will be no winner or loser. It's a proof. He, Kazguro's Orgrim, has extremely strong attack power, but this attack power is not outrageous, and many masters at sea can still withstand it. But now, Orgrim's fruit power has awakened. Jun did not explain what changes Orgrim's abilities brought after he awakened. But Garp and Warring States, which one is not the top hero? Jun didn't need to explain anything, they could already guess a thing or two. There is no doubt that in this kind of battle, Gate can't hold anything back, so he must have used the awakening power of the devil fruit. The barrier that top heroes such as Kaido and Orgrim could not break has definitely appeared. However, Newgate still lost, and lost so quickly. What does this mean? This shows that Orgrim's ability, his already very powerful attack power, has reached a new level. Even Newgate's absolute defense could not withstand his attack. If Newgate can't do it, can Sengoku and Garp do it? I have no idea. Especially Warring States, he felt even more uncomfortable. Orgrim's ability could restrain him, a phantom beast type, to a certain extent. Now, Orgrim is really awakened. How could he, a naval marshal, compete with Orgrim in the future? How to spell? When facing ordinary enemies, he, Sengoku, is an esper of the phantom beast species and is unparalleled in the limelight. When facing Orgrim, he was suddenly cut into an ordinary animal type, and the most special one was the everyone fruit. The silence of Sengoku and Garp did not affect Jun. She still truthfully reported what she saw and heard. "Marshal boss, Garp, maybe we have to admit one thing," Jun said softly. Before Garp and Sengoku could speak, Jun continued, "That is, Orgrim is no longer in the same sequence as us. Before, everyone was on the same level. Maybe their strength was still high or low, but it was absolutely impossible to form a crushing situation, let alone have an absolute advantage. But now, from the battle between Orgrim and Newgate, from a medium point of view, Orgrim has transcended this category and has reached a new realm. That is the extreme of power. He may have reached the end of his power and reached the other side that we have never touched," Jun said in a deep voice. The more they listened to Jun's report, the heavier the hearts of Sengoku and Garp became. When their navy seized the opportunity to lay out a new world, they were about to enter the new world and wrestle with the pirates. Orgrim became the new generation of pirate overlord. There is no doubt about this, because he defeated Newgate. What is even more uncomfortable is that Orgrim, the pirate overlord, in terms of personal power, transcended all the top masters. Entered a new realm and stood on the other side. The joy of catching Charlotte Lingling and seizing the portal of the new world was instantly washed away. What followed was a strong pressure. Even if Orgrim has not made any move. Even if their navy and Orgrim still maintain a certain tacit understanding. But this strong pressure seems to have passed through the sea and crossed thousands of mountains and rivers. In essence, sexually placed in front of the naval marshal of the Warring States period. Could this be the coercion of the world? A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 600. Regarding the outcome of the strongest battle between Orgrim and Newgate. Like a storm, it swept the entire world in a very short period of time. This battle ended so quickly that no one imagined. Many people never imagined that Newgate would be the strongest man who had conquered several eras and conquered countless heroes on the sea. He was defeated so quickly. He was defeated by Orgrim in less than a day. At the same time, information about the awakening of Orgrim's devil fruit ability also spread. At this moment, everyone realized one thing. That is, it is not that Newgate has become weaker, on the contrary, he is still strong, stronger than 99% of the people in the sea. This battle, this duel, ended so abruptly. It's not because Newgate has become weaker, but because Orgrim is too strong. The ultimate power is Orgrim. This sentence began to spread on the sea. No one will argue about whether Orgrim is powerful or not. Ben, there are still people who will compare Orgrim with Garp, compare Orgrim with Kaido and so on. Compare who is stronger between them. Nowadays, they will only compare who among them has a smaller gap with Orgrim. No one doubts that Orgrim's strength has stood out from the ranks of top players who have been dormant for many years. He reached the other side and stood at the end of strength. In the name of being the strongest, he looks down at all the living beings on the sea. Second to none. Pirate Overlord, the strongest in the world. These two names undoubtedly fall on Orgrim's head. The war in the New World gradually calmed down with Whitebeard's defeat. Regarding the Whitebeard pirates, the Warhammer pirates did not put on a posture of pursuing them fiercely. There is no intention to kill them completely. It's not as ruthless as dealing with Totlan. Of course, as the winner, the Warhammer pirates still quickly annexed many of the Whitebeard pirates' territories. In fact, when news of Newgate's defeat spread, whenever the warships of the Warhammer pirates arrive, those countries flying the flag of the Whitebeard pirates will choose to remove the Newgate flag and replace it with the flag of the Warhammer pirates as soon as possible. The princes and nobles went to the port to welcome the arrival of the Warhammer pirates. A posture of welcome, Master Wang. I have to say that the scene is a bit ironic, but it is extremely true. In the New World, what do these countries that are willing to fly the pirate flag on the royal flag seek? Seeking is a refuge and safety, nothing more than that. When Newgate was able to protect them, they were naturally loyal to Newgate. But when the flag of the Whitebeard pirates no longer represents the strongest and can intimidate all parties, the flag of the Warhammer pirates is naturally their first choice. I don't know whether it is intentional or unintentional. In short, although the losses in Newgate's territory were great, they were not completely lost. Most of his territory was driven outside the New World portal sea. Formed a first line of defense against naval forces. The Whitebeard pirates did not launch a too fierce counterattack. They resisted for a while and accepted this reality. If you lose, you lose. He, Newgate, can't afford to lose. Even if Orgrim didn't kill him, as the loser, he would naturally pay a certain price. In the same way, if he wins Newgate, he will still embezzle the resources and interests of the Warhammer pirates, and it has nothing to do with his relationship and friendship with Orgrim. It is precisely because of this performance of the Whitebeard pirates that they conveyed a voice of willingness to accept defeat to the sea. That's why Orgrim's reputation as the pirate overlord is so secure. There is no one in the pirate camp in the New World who can resist his will. Big Mom pirates? It has become history. The Whitebeard pirates are willing to admit defeat. The Beast pirates are now following Orgrim. And everyone can see that these two pirate groups will have heirs in the future when Orgrim's son Andrest and Kaido's daughter have heirs. That's really a family. There is no need for them to fight life or death. And Orgrim has always been very generous to his allies. The Beast pirates also had a lot of benefits. One of the 4 emperors died, and Orgrim transcended to become the pirate overlord. Of the remaining 2 emperors, one is an ally of the Warhammer pirates, and the other is willing to admit defeat. In this new world, who else can stop Orgrim's will? He is the true uncrowned king. He hasn't even ascended the throne yet, but he has already grasped the pirates' royal power in his hands. Everyone can see it. Next, Orgrim will take the final step towards becoming the pirate king. At this step, he needs to meet the challenges of the new era. Those who do not want to succumb to the challenges of these so-called pirate emperors' silver medal players, such as, Sand Crocodile. However, most people think this is not very important. Crocodile will enter the new world. There is no doubt that he is a very outstanding character. But how far can he go in the end? Amazing, filling Charlotte Lingling's position and becoming the so-called pirate emperor. But Orgrim is already the pirate overlord. And no one expected Crocodile to win against Orgrim. Therefore, everyone knows that in this new era, Orgrim will face the most powerful challenge. Not from within the pirate camp. But in the past 800 years, there have been countless ups and downs, but it is still the maritime overlord, the navy headquarters, that is entrenched in the sea and possesses extremely powerful power. This new era will be a fierce battle between the old and the new overlords. He is the pirate overlord, fighting against the overlord of the sea in heaven and earth. Conflicts within the pirates? Just a small fight. The first half of the Grand Line. In a certain sea area near Alabasta. Crocodile's ship is sailing here. He can be said to have returned from the New World with a full load. Next, he only needs to integrate the power of Alabasta. Then you can go to the New World and fight for the future. But at this time, Crocodile's face didn't look very good. It can even be said that it is a bit gloomy. Pressure, extremely strong pressure. He could feel the pressure coming from the New World across thousands of mountains and rivers. Even though Khazgaro's Orgrim has not made any remarks against him, Sand Crocodile. The Warhammer pirates did not respond to him at all. But Crocodile can still feel this ubiquitous pressure. He understands that this kind of pressure can probably be felt by all silver medal players like him who want to compete for the future in the new era. This is the power of the pirate overlord. Orgrim didn't say or do anything. But he is able to overwhelm the world, making everyone feel his power and strength. Looking at the newspaper in his hand, there was a big news article written by Morgans himself. The manuscript is very valuable and analyzes the current situation of the times from all aspects. Crocodile also had to admit that Morgans was definitely a powerful guy. He is great at being able to accurately analyze the situation in the sea. Here, there is a conclusion of Morgans, that is, Morgans believes that in the future, the main contradiction in the New World and even the whole world will be concentrated between the two camps of the Navy and the pirates. This is the change of times. Before that, the main conflict in the world was centered on the pirates' struggle for kingship. Now, Orgrim holds the throne. Crocodile was certainly unhappy about this. The main conflict is between the Navy and pirates. That means that silver medal players like Crocodile will not be taken seriously by the Warhammer pirates at all. But he was unhappy, but Crocodile had to admit that this seemed to be a fact. He has shown so much in the New World that the Warhammer pirates pretend he doesn't exist. This is the proof. Originally, Crocodile thought this was good. The less you care about me, Crocodile, the more I will be able to surprise you when I return to the New World. That's right, Crocodile previously thought that the Warhammer pirates' indifference was arrogance. But now, he understands that this is not arrogance, but the real gap is too big. As someone who has fought against Whitebeard before, Crocodile knows very well how powerful Whitebeard is and how powerful the Whitebeard pirates are. Well, it can be said that Whitebeard was in his prime at that time. But the Whitebeard Orium face still had the power of awakening. There's not much difference at all, okay. Even Orgrim is stronger than Whitebeard. But he still won, and he lost. Now, I am recuperating and working hard for so many years. Crocodile thought that he might be able to compete with Whitebeard again. The result was good. Orgrim reached the other side, stood at the end of his power, and became the ultimate strongest. This is crazy. Is there any way for us people to survive? I was full of confidence before and wanted to enter the New World and show my talents. Nowadays, I feel the ubiquitous pressure from the New World. Crocodile felt very aggrieved. Putting away the newspaper in his hand, he slowly exhaled a puff of smoke and looked at the blue sea with a somewhat ethereal look. Although very reluctant. But Crocodile finally admitted it. I admit that there is still a big gap between myself and Orgrim. He realized one thing, and that was that he was full of wits. He had been planning the strategy for so long and used such a powerful conspiracy. But in the end, there was something missing. The gap between him and Orgrim seems to be reflected in this uprightness. No matter how brilliant or outstanding you are. But judging from the results, he can only be called a powerful hero. The means are brilliant, but the mind is gloomy. But, it just deserves the evaluation of difficult to deal with and not to be underestimated. Orgrim, on the other hand, doesn't have that many bells and whistles at all. Uprightly, in the New World, he defeated his opponent and sat uprightly as the pirate overlord. Holding the royal power, he is proud of the world. This is what is truly awesome. Without contrast, there is no harm. In comparison, in terms of structure and courage, he, Crocodile, lost. There was no confrontation and we lost. But no matter what, I am going to this New World. No matter whether I win or lose, I have to fight for it. Otherwise, what is the difference between me and Charlotte Lingling? If I don't even have this kind of courage, what's the point of my dormancy for nearly 20 years? Crocodile put away his misty thoughts and said to himself. His tone was very firm. Maybe he can't win, but he must fight. Fight with Orgrim, fight with the Navy, fight. I won't do this as the king of the Shishibukai. After being dormant for so many years, it's time for me, Crocodile, to step onto the stage of the New World. New era, from today onwards, it's coming, ha ha ha. Morgans is right, this is a showdown between pirates and navy, but who stipulates that only Orgrim can hold the royal power and represent the pirates? Crocodile whispered with a smile. His brave heart, which dares to seize the future, will not stop beating.